Chapter 11. Full Disclosure. When Ellen dropped Corey off at the front door of J.F. Kennedy Junior High School, he made a quick trip to his locker and went straight to his math classroom, even though classes wouldn't start for another 10 minutes. Corey liked it in the math room because he knew he was safe. It was a sanctuary from the meanness that some kids bring to school. No one would trip him or humiliate him there. Don came in to drop off his books. "Hey, Corey, come on out to my locker. I have something for you." Corey followed Don out to the locker. After opening it and digging in his book bag, Don fished out a triangular wedge of paper. "Here," he said, "it's from Kim, that girl who sits behind you in art." "What is it?" "Don't be stupid. It's a note. I was going to give it to you on the bus this morning, but you weren't there. I'll read it later." Math class started. The bridge project was almost finished and would be tested the next day. Near the end of the class period, the PA came on, and all work on the bridge project stopped. "Mrs. Barrens," said the speaker in the wall. "Yes," Mrs. Barrens said to the wall. "Do you have Corey Nelson with you?" "Yes, I do." "Would you send him to Mrs. Conley's office?" "Sure," the math teacher replied, turning to Corey. "You know the way?" "Yeah." "Well, it was nice knowing you, Corey," Don said with a dopey grin. "Come on in, Corey," Mrs. Conley said. She looked more serious than he'd ever seen her. Corey sat down and she closed the door. He started to get nervous. "Your foster mother was just here to talk with me." Corey shifted in his seat. "Am I being sent away?" "No, not even close," was the immediate reply. "She just wanted me to fill in some details for you." Corey took a deep breath as the guidance counselor continued. "She told me about last night. I didn't know they hadn't told you about Andy, but I guess I can understand." Mrs. Conley turned her chair slightly, took off her glasses, then continued. "It was a painful time for all of us. Andy was a great kid. Everybody liked him. He loved sports and model trains. Ben and Ellen were proud of him, and rightfully so. In 1987, when Andy was just 14, he was diagnosed with leukemia. He was in the hospital for months, and Ellen never left his side. She was away from work for so long, she lost her job." Corey was listening intently. "I was lucky enough to be the one to work with Andy to try to keep him from falling too far behind in school. Most of the time, I just sat and listened. That's how your foster mother and I got to be such good friends." The medical bills piled up at the same time that the drought hit in 1988. They knew that they would have to sell the farm. It was the only way they could get out of debt. Meanwhile, Andy was getting worse, and it was just a matter of time. They waited until after his death to sell the farm so Andy wouldn't have to know about it. Some big potato company bought it. At this point, Corey's cheeks were wet with tears. The last 8 years were tough for them. They pulled out of every organization they belonged to and just shut themselves off from the community. There was a time when they thought about splitting up. Reverend Olson got them into counseling. I've been after them for years to think about adopting, but they thought it would be too painful. We talked about foster parenting, but they weren't sure about that either. And then you came along. I can't think of a better thing to have happened to them or to you." Mrs. Conley handed Corey a tissue. "Look," she said, "I've told you enough. You need to talk to them. Let them know how you feel." "But I said some awful things. I didn't know." "I know, Ellen. Not more than 30 minutes ago, she was in that very chair telling me how glad they both were that you are part of their lives. Now, if I could just get all three of you fools to talk to each other instead of me, I'd be able to get some work done around here." Corey smiled slightly. Looking at the clock, he asked, "What period is it?" "Your science class is almost over, if that's what you're thinking." Corey nodded and said, "Yeah." "That brings me to my last question. Do you want me to wave my magic wand and switch you out of Mr. Culex's science class? It would mean messing up the rest of your schedule." "No," Corey said confidently. "That's what Ellen said you would say." "Can I go now?" "Not quite. Ellen is down the hall in the conference room meeting with the principal. She would like you to join her there." "Here? Ellen is still here?" "No, she's in Zanzibar. Of course she's here, just down the hallway on the right." Corey knocked on the door and walked in. Sitting around a large circular table was Ellen and Mrs. Danaus, the school principal. "Hi, Corey," Ellen said. "Have you met Mrs. Danaus yet?" "Hello, Corey," said Mrs. Danaus. "Your foster mother was just telling me all about you." That worried him just a little. "Please sit down." As Corey sat down next to Ellen, she caught his eye briefly. That was all it took to tell her that Karen had told him everything. "Tell me," Mrs. Danaus asked, "how have things been going for you here at JFK?" Corey spent the next 45 minutes explaining most of what he had gone through so far. Some things he left out. Mrs. Danaus took notes as he talked and then said, "Thanks, that helps a great deal." Then she added, "Mr. Culex will be down in a minute." Corey looked alarmed. "What is he coming down here for?" "We're just going to talk a little, get things back on track," Mrs. Danaus said. When the science teacher walked into the room, he looked at the people sitting around the table and said hi to no one in particular. As he sat down, Mrs. Danaus said, "Have you met Mrs. Rain? She's Corey Nelson's foster mother." "It's nice to meet you," Mr. Culex said. "She is a little concerned about science class. Could you tell us what went on yesterday?" "Sure, I'd love to," he said. "First, let me say that I commend you on having Corey as a visitor in your house. As I'm sure you've already found out, Corey can be, well, a bit of a hothead." Corey could feel the table vibrating slightly as Ellen's grip on the edge tightened. Mr. Culex continued, "As with any troubled child, particularly one as outspoken as Corey, I think strict discipline is our only hope. Don't you agree?" Ellen's eyes were getting large, and she inhaled deeply. Before she could speak, Mrs. Danaus jumped in. "Could you tell us about yesterday?" "Oh, sure. Corey wasn't ready for a quiz, and he stormed out of the room," he said calmly. Ellen had reached her limit. She raised up out of her chair and leaned as close to Mr. Culex as the table between them would allow. Then she opened fire. "How can you justify giving anyone a quiz on things you didn't teach?" Sensing the tone the meeting was taking, he said, "I don't have to listen to this assault," and he stood up to leave. "Sit down, Mr. Culex," Mrs. Danaus said firmly. He sat. Ellen glanced at her notes and then continued, "Why did you say, if your parents cared about your education, they would have kept you in one school, to a child who lost his parents only a few months ago?" Mr. Culex was stunned, and Corey was amazed. How could she have found that out? Those were the exact words Mr. Culex had used. "Next, what kind of crap do you call this?" She dropped the pile of worksheets onto the table. If this is what you're passing off as education these days, then maybe it's time you sat on the other side of the desk for a while. Please understand that for these last weeks of school, I will be looking over Corey's schoolwork very carefully. I will expect a weekly note from you and a telephone call anytime you even think about putting a grade less than a B on his work. Finally, you need to know that Corey is not a visitor in my house. He is a member of my family. I think that at this point, you have a pretty good idea of how I feel about my family. Have I made myself clear? Mr. Culex didn't say a word. He just stared straight ahead. This was the look Corey had grown to fear. "Corey, this would be a good time for you to head down to lunch," Mrs. Danow said. Corey stood up to leave. The smile he got from Ellen carried him through the rest of the day. Waiting just outside the office door as Corey walked out was Dawn, who said, "You owe me big time, Corey." "Was it you who—" "Don't ask." The two friends walked to the lunchroom.